Um, well, we just unmuted. We made a big time mistake. So we're going to start this over again. This is Bart Sharp and Alethiea Sophia, and we are at Becoming Quantum Conscious at United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Radio out of New Orleans, Louisiana. And we are at LeConce. And I hope everybody that was looking at us saying, where are their voices? We were muted, and we had to whip the technical director on that one, which would be me. And I'm not really into self-abuse, but so we'll just move on. Today's topic is becoming the principles of light embodiment. And kind of like we have a live audience here today at LeConce. People that are staying here have graced us with this presence. And we really thought it would be kind of fun to do this, to have people here and not emptiness. Now, Alethiea was with me 7 weeks ago, and we were exploring this topic, and she was, gosh, in a room with her dogs, I think, in the background.
Yes, yeah.
And it was really quite wonderful.
I can hear them trying to get in.
Is that what's trying to get in? Yes,
Yeah.
behind the green door are all the dogs, and they're wondering what Mama is doing in this room with this strange man. You know, what are we doing today? Oh,
Well, it's a very special day.
special day.
Our dear friend over here reminded us it's Pentecost. So there's a lot of energy for our gathering, which is wonderful. We're going to speak about that later. What are we doing today? We're channeling some light, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Pentecostal light is a great example of you can bring in any energy possible. And you think of something like Pentecost, it's been practiced for hundreds of years. Therefore, it has a consciousness. Therefore, it's accessible because people have laid it down, and therefore you can access it. Just like when people come here to Southwest France or to Lacan in this beautiful hotel here, and it's in the Magdalene area, but it's also in the Cathars area, this ancient holy people. You are in that energy, as they say, and you can dial it up.
If anyone's wondering who are the Cathars, well, I think we would be quite accurate in suggesting that they are the spiritual descendants of Mary Magdalene. So there's a very obvious and very strong presence here. And for some of us, it is something that cannot be denied. It brings you here by the heart. It deposits you here and says, this is where you must live. And you have no choice but to obey. And it's thick and it's strong. And even when you go back to your homeland, you dream about it. You see references to it, symbols, books, movies, music. It will not let you go until you show up.
Yes.
And surrender.
And why is, and it comes up with the question, is this coming from your head, your heart, a greater consciousness, out of your body? And I'd probably, go with out of your body. It's like it's recorded in your body, and your mind has to follow. Your body is part of your, one of the parts of that would be your ego. And it's trying to nudge your ego aside and saying, there's a spirit much bigger and much more profound. I want you to listen, wake up, and feel what is going to draw you here. It won't let you alone. And that's part of what light embodiment is what song of some of a higher power really resonates with you. Let's talk to somebody in the audience. I'm horrible with names, but she was telling me about homeopathic remedies. And when she was talking about it, light was showing up inside of her because that's her path. It's her affinity. And it has a lot of different ways of happening with people. And you took this journey saying, I'm going to come to Southwest France just
Yes.
on a whim.
Yes. And the light, when it came into my system, was slightly erotic. And I do feel that the Magdalene energy and even Jesus Christ has a slightly erotic current. It's filled with desire. It's filled with longing. It asks you to give of yourself completely, as you would the beloved. So if you imagine that I'm sat here in the south of France being very still in my meditations, think again. No, it moves me. I'm dancing, I'm praying, I'm gesturing that full body surrender.
Yes.
And so are these ladies.
Yes. And when we talk about erotic, I think it's like, how do you feel the space between your hips? How do you feel that energy that makes you feel alive and moves you? And it's kind of the beginning of this flow of the earth coming up into you. And then you take a journey. You follow that light. And I like to see it as light.
Yes.
That's what the principles of light embodiment is understanding many vibrations. Yeah.
I remember in the book Anna, Grandmother of Jesus, just as I'm beginning my research on Mary's Essenes and perhaps a second Jewish settlement on the sides of Mount Bugarash, which is our sacred mountain. And so Claire Hartsong, I believe, said Mary Magdalene would walk barefoot across the land, and every footstep was a sacred kiss. So I was thinking of Nebius, our local labyrinth. What must that be like to be so conscious that every footprint contains an intimate kiss to the moss, to the rocks, to the soil, to the earthworms? And so obviously I went to Nebius and did exactly that. And again, that erotic energy, and maybe even erotic's the wrong word because we've been using it so much for human pastimes.
Yes.
What if it's not limited to human pastimes?
It can be as simple as learning how to walk like a cat.
Yeah.
And how they feel their whole body when they walk.
Yes.
And they're just in that synchronicity of that experience, and they're totally present in the moment. Of course, we have this thing called applied defensive systems or ego, or I like to call it a masculine side. In other words, we really start this way. We really start as light embodied beings as a baby. It's all there. It's all there for us. But yet we have traumas. We're told no. We're told to shut things down. And sometimes we're just plainly overwhelmed with how we were treated as children. And so that feminine side, and this is how I think of the divine feminine, is the feminine side is that inner child. And it somehow gets pulled over to the masculine side in defensive systems because we live in a school of hard knocks. And part of that process is learning how to come back. How do you come back as an adult to be that child of light? And it's a lot more fun, I think. Well, maybe being a baby is fun, but as adults, you have more options. Yeah.
Being a devotee of the Gnostic path, I believe I'm finally settling into one of their central truths, is that evolution comes at the meeting of polar opposites.
Say that again. That's a bit heavy.
Evolution is made at the meeting of polar opposites, light, dark, male, female, in, out, above, below, man, woman.
Yes. Pain, ecstasy.
Law and order, creativity and spontaneity.
Yes.
Only when those two show up in equal measure do we change.
Well, it creates a necessity.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. And we don't like it. We don't like it when the two are meeting head to head like two serpents.
Yes.
But that's the energy
it is
of the new.
And the more we evolve in light embodiment, what you talk about that is almost like polarity. Polarity is one of those ingredients in it that we're fighting. Maybe we're going in one direction and this one's working against us, and we're finally confronted in an issue, and they collide. And light and dark, or all of those other great examples, show up in different applications. And the more we're in light embodiment, we do not have the polarity anymore. I think that's, I mean, if even since we've talked about Mary Magdalene, might as well talk about Jesus. And I always think about, well, what would this be like when he's on the cross, and did he have a non-polarized point of view? It's like, well, this is the job I've taken on, and yes, it really hurts, but I'm going to follow this through. This would be the most detached way.
I've been reading a book called The Gnostic Crucifixion. So in it, I haven't quite taken it all the way down, so maybe a little summarized version is the cross is that intensity and immensity and all the worst of the worst. And on that cross is Yeshua, the highest light of the highest light. And in that meeting is the transformation. So the Gnostic folk say he was having no problem with it at all. He said yes to this. He knew what was coming. And so, the posture wasn't this or this. It was this.
That's right.
And it's welcome. I welcome it all. And I read the book and went, you passed out. Because it was just so high for me. The truth was so high. Yeah.
And so detached. And probably everybody in the audience would say, well, would you like that Christ consciousness? And you're probably going to go, heck yeah. And then you ask them the next question. Are you willing to do the work it takes in your own personal life to be at that state of detachment, vulnerability, allowance, and also to have that with your most deepest, darkest secrets, your deepest, darkest pain and things that have happened to you? Are you willing to look in on that? Because that's another part of light embodiment. The shadow.
I mapped something during the Passion. I said to myself, okay, what's actually going on here? And I came up with 5 wounds of love. So it's like 5 steps. Can you embody these 5 steps?
5 steps.
So it begins with betrayal. And of course, we all know that one in our personal and our intimate lives. Betrayal. Step 2, denial. Step 3, judgment. Step 4, abandonment. Step 5, separation. So those 5 yummy wounds of love or wounds of Christ, can we go through them by ourselves when they come in just by thoughts? Then can we go in them level 2 with another?
Indeed. Or alone. I'm a bachelor myself.
We're very good at self-generating the wounds of love.
Guys, it's weird. It has its ups and downs. It's just a different path. I just did this tour. I'm a tour guide in Southwest France. Just finished my tour season. And I was with women that were all in their upper 60s, one in her lower 70s, and they were therapists. And they did a very visceral, body-based therapy. It wasn't in their heads. It was like, can you feel this inside of you, your anger and all of this stuff? This is the therapeutic work they did for years and years. And they had never been to this land in Southwest France. And as we both know, there's some powerful mojo in this place. And, there's plenty of sacred sites. And those of you who want to go to Southwest France, or those of you here in the audience that are in Southwest France, you got to check out these sites. And, people don't really know how to anticipate them a lot of times because they've never felt anything of such deep feminine presence within the earth as this. We could call it Mary Magdalene or Mother Mary or Sophia, but I think it's even beyond that. So here they are without any experience with this guy leading them. That's kind of funny in itself. But they had the most phenomenal experience because they knew what you were saying earlier, the erotic centeredness and groundedness that comes out of their womb. And we had a great time. Still recovering. And they're flying home today, like going, what happened? Maybe, if they're lucky, you don't want to go back to normal after you experience something like that. You want to see what's going to happen to you. Yeah. So, I always think that that's part of this journey of light is knowing what's going on in your womb. Everybody talks about, well, you should go in your heart. Feel the light in your heart, and that's great. The heart is a really strong muscle and consciousness, and it's very different than the rest of the body. However, we both are between the hip persons. This is the same. It sounds like it. She feels it, and she holds that power. And the light embodiment contributes to everything you do.
In this area, we call it a sacred feminine vortex. And it's only a matter of time, probably hours actually, upon arrival, that any imbalance, any fear, any awkwardness, discomfort, guilt, shame, or anything that we may have with feminine energy in all of its guises, from, think animals, from messiness and unpredictability and dirtiness. I don't think all that stuff, but I'm just saying it to recognize, of animals. Then if it's not that, it could be the chaos of the weather, and it's just going dark now. Like, oh no, a thunderstorm's coming. Oh, it's sunny again. The chaos and unpredictability of people. We said we'd meet at 3, but you just show up at 5. So the feminine is growing. She's unpredictable, she's wild, she's untamable, and gracious, kind, comforting, tender, profound, deep, wild, mysterious, medicinal. So it's not comfortable being here, and it's certainly not predictable.
Not in the winter, especially.
No. Yeah. So I always say to folk when they show up, hold on to your hat, buckle up. Anything you have unhealed regarding the feminine is going to show up in about 5 minutes. So it's mothers and daughters and sisters and aunties and grandmas and just the feminine.
Yes.
In all her guises.
Yes.
Self. If you're a woman, your self feminine is going to say, hi, I've been meaning to see you for a while.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so as you walk on this land, you feel it underneath your feet. And you pay attention like the cat. Like, what does that feel like? And how is it rising up in my body? And where is it alive? And where is it that I do not feel it? Those are both important to pay attention to while you're on this journey. Then if you can feel the uncomfortable places that you've not felt, and one of the best ways you can do it is like when you start to think about something that's negative, for example, that you've been afraid of, like, don't talk about that. No, don't talk about that. Ask your body, where are you holding that? Where are you holding that? And then allow this light that you've been accumulating to go right around that place and give it light and exposure. And maybe stories will show up. They're like, oh, this is what happened. And now, since that's probably a childhood memory, it's just an energy. That's all it is an energy. And I can change it just like that by bringing in another energy. And that's one of the principles of light embodiment. It is the energy that can change anything inside of you. But the first principle is You have to understand and feel viscerally where it is. And that's what a lot of this training is. This is my first line on my notes that I've not used. Crossover from intellect to visceral. So you want to see the intellect of all the stories, and to get out your pad when you're here at LeConte, or when you're in your spiritual sabbatical. Maybe you're in South Texas. That's where I used to go. And you write, and it comes up. But when you get it up present, that's when you feel it. And that's when you use the light. It's one of the really great techniques you can use, even if you just use the light from your heart or from your womb and feel that and just bring it to that pain. And it'll change. This is a great way to change any behavior, anything that you're depressed about or sad about, or any emotion. All of those weird thought forms in the back of your head that just won't go away. This is a great way to disravel them, is by finding where the thing in your head has a location in your body and they work together in negativity. This is like an addictive process. Your negative thoughts, your fears, and what you're afraid of is possibly, for many people, their greatest addiction. Because you get addicted to reliving those things again and again. And it feels good to be in pain for some people. Some of us we have the courage to look into it enough to where we finally unravel it. And then with the light work, you can address those energies by just taking the light of your heart and taking it to that stressed place. And a lot of times of course, on this camera, you can't see my hand go down to my gut, but that's where we usually hold it in our gut, right in here, around our belly button, between our hips, in those locations. And your body will show you this. Your body doesn't want to hold this stuff. It's tired of the weight that you've had to carry. It's not your fault that you've carried it. It's just what you were presented to. But it's your choice and your possibility that you can release it with a lighter vibration. Yeah.
There are some voluntary nuns in medieval times. So this is really important. They were voluntary. They were of the Christian faith. They were called the Beguines. Maybe you ladies have heard of these women, the Beguines. But they held a monastery and a sisterhood, but all voluntary. So the Church of Rome hadn't approved them, but they were recognized by everybody as sisters and nuns of a theological society. But they were quite mystical. And they came up with this term, divine depths.
Divine depths. And say the name of those nuns again and where they're located.
Beguines. Beguines. And they were mostly started off in Belgium, then they went to the Netherlands, and then maybe coming down into France, Germany.
Okay.
But, your neck of the woods, mystical nuns, and they spoke of the divine depths. And in the divine depths, that's where you find your despair, your dark night of the soul, your dryness, your spiritual dryness, your aridity, your praying, nothing. And we don't like that feeling. But they said, this is God being extra intimate. So God trusts the Beguines so much now that he or she will show a little bit more. So the pain and the sorrow and the dryness and the despair is God showing a little bit more than he does to normal people. And so instead of despair, it's like, wow, I can feel God's despair. And so in that moment, they're back to their prayer with extra vigor, extra energy, and of course, response.
You might even think of it as an opportunity to have pain once they have learned that tool.
Yes.
Like, Oh boy.
Yes.
Another limitation I can unravel.
Yes. Yes.
And what happens when you unravel all of this good stuff that's limitations that, most of the world is like living in this pain and trying to repress it, hate it, avoid it, drink it under the table or worry it under the table. But it's really just an opportunity because we all have it. We all have things we've unresolved because that's part of being human.
Mm.
I don't know anybody.
Being at Le Conte, Petey and I are often daily.
No.
Mhm. Because of the enormity of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm noticing I just cannot forgive him. I have a big long list of why not to forgive him. All these little resentments I've stacked up since being here, because obviously to make this run, it's got to be 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's 80-20, the other one's going to start to get resentful. So I'm in this process. I'm talking about the wounds of love, of saying how effortless it is, and the divine depths of the
effortless. I don't think that's in the vocabulary.
Here I am, jammed. I'm jammed. I cannot find my forgiveness.
Mm.
I'm pretty sure I will. But we're talking about, so in this live moment, I am jammed.
Mm.
I cannot soften and offer forgiveness.
It's always a path going back.
Yeah.
And for my former wife, she was always my father.
Mm.
And I had to just really forgive my father and just start seeing how much she was that.
Yes.
And it's funny because I still have the same emotions with it.
Mm.
They're just, for me, it was not speaking up enough.
Yes.
And now I speak up, but I still had the same feelings. Just something has added. The more I become aware, I have more tools to interact because I'm not so attached to my old patterns of how I used to do it.
Yeah.
It's funny how relationships take us into that.
Yeah. Quagmire.
Quagmire. Yeah, it's a search.
Yeah. Yeah. It's those
really
pairs
is.
of opposites again.
It really is.
Yeah.
And part of the light is
my head wrap keeps
having that lovely relationship with that, and crying and laughter, and having that place with that. That's part of the sacred union.
Yeah.
I think we both know a term, and maybe the radio audience doesn't know this term, or people here. I'm building kitchen, by the way.
Okay.
What was that again?
Heroes
Gamos.
Yes.
Heroes Gamos. And that is the light between two people. Some people would call it the sacred union. Some people would say it's only between two light beings, like Jesus and Mary Magdalene. I have a lot of theories with it, but also it's a sacred union between two people who are really willing. And to allow, even if it's not all working, can you still open up in light with that person or be willing?
Yeah.
It has so many levels. Any reflections on Heroes Gamos?
I think I first came across the term sort of when I was researching Druidry or paganism, that a ripe woman of the clan would take on the powers of the goddess, probably on Beltane, 1st of May, and that the most virile of the men in the clan would take on the power of the god. And they would come together and offer one another their everythingness, their complete wide open heart, the luminosity of their spirit, the ferocious depths of their sexuality whilst maintaining the divine presence. So it's a little bit like, let's just say, family constellations. You surrender yourself and allow in the Almighty Self. And this was done not just for them. So it's not a self-fulfilling process. It's for all the people. And of course, all the people are witnessing. So there's a circle of the rest of the clan watching this hugely intimate act. So that's going to be a lot of energy.
Oh, yeah.
And you've got to be really careful.
Yes.
Because as we know, those practices in certain epochs, Egypt, probably Rome, definitely, fell from grace. And it really wasn't a uprising of this harvest for all the people, for all the animals, for the seasons, for the food, for the water. In the end, it became a little bit distorted, and it was just, again, self-fulfilling pleasure, self-fulfilling.
Yes.
So we have to be, well, I feel, we have to be very careful with the Erios Gamos, and it is true, and it is noble, and it is genuine.
And thinking in the States, it's always fascinating with me to be around Europeans, because so many references with the Europeans comes from history. And the Americans, we really don't refer to history too much. Maybe it's because we're a young country, but we're more like, let's have it in the now, you know?
Yeah.
Let's create in the now. We'll be present in the now. It's just funny how that works, but you know, they're trying to do sexuality with a tension and release, as opposed to pure expansion. And if the couple in the circle maybe would be able to learn how to be part of the community and expand and be in all of that and be a master of that, they might be in light embodiment.
Yes.
You know, how much can you include, even when you're talking to somebody? Are you in your head or you're in your heart? You know, everybody, most people are in their heads. They're trying to think about what is the right thing to say. And particularly if they have a desire or a proving, or maybe they feel unconfident. So they go, I have to try harder. And all of a sudden, they become more linear, as opposed to the heart, which opens up. So if these young couple could open that heart up and feel that energy of the whole tribe with them, that they're not alone and everybody had that same feeling, it might be a phenomenal experience.
Yeah.
And think about we'll go back to JC and Magdalene. What energies were they bringing in when they loved each other? I mean, I think they would do it all the time, but you know, they might be having, I don't know if they drink coffee in those days, but you know, they're having their favorite drink, but they would be totally open. You know, their whole body would feel each other in this interaction, you know. And so when you were bringing in a, you know, Hieros Gamos, which would be the lovemaking, or just that divine communion together, it would be so much more than that, which takes a word that's really important: practice. How do you practice being a light being? You know, there's 101 tools. I don't know anybody has a book on that yet. Maybe yours. She just has 10 books. My favorite is Fierce Feminine Rising. It's great. great. But all of these great topics about male and female, sexuality, spirituality, coming together in a big way.
Do you remember the movie Avatar?
Oh, yes.
Of course you do.
Of course.
That moment when the whole tribe are with the base of the tree, and they've got their tails and they've plugged into the roots of the tree, and you know they're doing their thing. To me, that's Erios Gamos. So it's not like, okay, me and you and and they're secondary.
Mm-hmm.
We're all in this together.
Yes.
We are totally expanding and opening and surrendering and letting
Indeed.
go and in bringing in. Why? We actually don't know. because it's the 1st of May.
Just
It's Beltane.
because. Just
Beltane.
because. It's just
Yeah.
because.
Yeah.
If it's a good tribe in the ancient days, theoretically, they were doing this together. But I don't know if there's any time in human history that humans have been perfect.
No.
They have their flaws, they have their jealousies, they have their angers, they have their competitions. And then when they bring them to the rituals, that stuff gets included.
Yeah.
And it brings up the question.
Yeah.
How do you bring that into circle? How do you bring those things into your circle to where they're a part of it and then they're acknowledged? And at the same time, you are in a higher place. And I like to think of a British psychologist, David Hawkins, author of Power versus Force.
Yes.
In one of his videos, he's talking about his shadow, and he had become so affirmed with his shadow. And yet he said, this shadow never really goes. It always talks to you. It always reminds you it's there. But I have no fear about it. In fact, he just said, oh, it's you. What do you got to tell me? Is there some message you need to tell me? It's something important. Okay, thank you very much. And then we move on. But there was no resistance to his limitations. He just gave himself allowance. And so when you're with somebody that you love or you're just caring for, and it can just be as easy as this. You tell your body, okay, I know I got repressed anger, or I'm jealous of this person, or I'm trying too hard. I want them to really like me, And can I just feel that and let it set back in the background? Like put it in your left pocket. It's right there, I know where my sadness is, or my depression, or where it is, and I'm going to pay attention to you. But can I step into something unique? And one of the most important things is intention and location. Real estate, it's like location, location, location. You got a great location at LeConte's. It's right by Chateau de Montségur in the woods, very spiritual. It's going to lead you in all kinds of trouble because it's so powerful. I'm getting a little sidetracked. Anyway, so put your location in your heart. And it's really as simple as that. It's put it right here when you talk. When I did a tour group with all of these ladies that were in their 60s, of course, I'm in the same age group, and they're professionals. I'm a self-taught shaman. And it was just like, how do we deal with, the one guy with 6 badass women that were really powerful and they expect you to guide them? How do you deal with that? 2 words: listen, open your heart.
Yeah. And
the rest will figure itself out. And it's one of the key things about light work and intimacy is, can you keep it right there? Can you love right here?
Nice.
Yeah. So, where are we going to go next? We've covered a lot of good stuff here. I think we talk really fast.
Yeah, I think so.
We got a good chatter together.
Yeah.
We really didn't think we were going to do this together until I came here a couple hours ago. I thought, why don't we play with this together? What do you think? It's like, yeah, let's do this together. And it's a very light. There was no judgments about it. And that's such an important part about light embodiment, is that can you step into the possibility of what it is? and let go of your judgments about where you think it will go.
Mm.
You know, it's kind of like being in a live audience, or the first time I was on radio and there was lots of people listening and I had no idea who was listening. You have to ask a question. Questions open you up to possibilities and to seeing it very differently. And one of the questions I was asking is, what will it take for me to be here now and not live in a fear? And there's two things about that: opening the question up, but also seeing what you're afraid of in any situation. The question will give you balance with your fear. It'll make your fear more present to you. And that's exactly what you want. It's just like when you're in an argument with somebody, if you can catch yourself and say, what's right about this that I'm not getting? All of a sudden, your higher consciousness will pop in and bring you a different thought. What's the pattern that I'm trying to break? You know, what is the mistake here that I'm making that I've made before? And suddenly, what you're doing is you're getting out of your mind and you're getting into the consciousness of your body, a higher consciousness. And a question gives it permission to show up. And then you start to step into more of a light consciousness. More points of view open. And, you know, and thinking about this group, I think they're my team story today, because it was such a phenomenal experience. It was a win-win for everybody. But I had to be willing to make mistakes and laugh at my mistakes. And these are all the ways that you unravel your ego. Just always be willing to look at your mistakes. And why are we doing ego discussion on a show that's called Principles of Light Embodiment on United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Radio out of New Orleans, Louisiana? I always have to do that sometimes. So that's where we're on tonight. And why do we do this stuff? It's like your ego and your repressed emotions are like lead weights in your body. Their heaviness, their density, and they really want to be released. But they won't be released unless they're addressed. And when they are addressed, then you start to have a space for more light to come in. And it can come in from so many directions, so many places. So as we sit here at LeConte, we have a source of, and we're just talking about this place. It's a special place, but it can be any place. You can be in Los Angeles, California, in an office building, you know, in downtown LA. There's resources there just as well. So here, light resources. Where do you pull from? And chip in if you have any ideas. First and foremost, your angels. They're always willing to be with you. Right behind you. All you got to do is ask. That's a problem with angels. They really can't come in unless you ask. They have that little primal directive thing, I think, just like Star Trek. Of course, LeConte, there's tons and millions of trees around here. Trees are almost like an infinite source. So you have an infinite source of nature all the way around you. If you ever really just leaned up against a tree and allow that energy to come into you, you know what I mean? It's an infinite source. Of course, you have Gaia. Of course, you have this spring out back that is all of this water from source of Gaia. Of course, you have fairies. You have the Fae. You have the land of Mary Magdalene and the sacred feminine. All at your resource. And that's just from the top of my head. Just like if it was in Austin, Texas, and I wanted to hook into Austin, Texas, which is where I live when I'm not in France. I'm picking up on the inventiveness of the people. This feeling that anything is possible. That's why I love about Americans. They kind of have this brash. Anything's possible. We can do it. It's kind of like that in Austin, Texas, particularly. So yeah, that's a great energy to tap into. Yeah. If you're tapping into in your office in Los Angeles, you're got all of these people focused. And you go, wow, I'd like to connect to that infinite intensity consciousness of hyper focus that everybody has, and have that energy within me that is available. If you're in Keon, this is a town nearby that I'm staying, there's a lot of people retired. And you got to think, gee, these people must have a lot of power because they have been able to create their lives where they get to go live in Southwest France all the time. They must have some kind of mojo working for them because they have that energy. Yeah. I'd like to connect with that energy and bring that into my embodiment. Like anything that you can bring in that. And that's really all it is like you start to get the feel of what it's like to be around all of these powerful people that have accomplished many great things that live in Keon. And start to feel them, feel that embodiment, and allow it to come into your body. I use this statement. This is an access consciousness statement. When we think about people that have done this stuff, they're very inventive. So let's work with inventiveness. But the access consciousness statement I use is I invite the infinite intensity of consciousness of any particular energy to activate. And it starts to come in, and I multiply it 1 billion times 1 billion times 1 billion. So I want you to think about all the inventive people that are around. And if you live in Keon, you might think about all of the people that are really powerful. And there's a lot of retired English people. And the one thing I like about the English, there's a lot of people who listen to this on United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Radio from the UK. And what I like about the English is they're very powerful people. They just have something in their womb that is powerful. They get things done. Little bitty island controlled the world at one time. That's kind of phenomenal. So think of that power, what that is, the power of that people that invent, that hold power inside of them. So we invite the infinite intensity of consciousness of the light of that power to activate in all of us 1 billion times 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 1 billion. Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, all 9 shorts, boys, and beyonds. So that is an access consciousness activation statement. And we're just going to play with another activation statement or two here. Everything about the feminine energy of this land. I've walked this land. Just think about this energy of Gaia, the earth, ancient. Whatever that image is in you, what does it feel viscerally inside of you? So we ask the infinite intensity of consciousness of that energy to activate 1 billion times 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 1 billion. Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, all 9 shorts, boys, and beyonds. And you may be thinking, well, I'm 8,000 miles away, and energy work doesn't work on radio. And I'd have to say that that's not true at all, because there's no such a thing as time and space. And the internet does work quite well about transferring energy. And what does that tell you about you? Your energy can go everywhere around the planet. So everybody that is in their heart consciousness, that is in a place of higher love, higher vibration. We'd like to connect with all of those people. And we ask the infinite intensity of consciousness of that light energy to activate with not only everybody here in this room, but everybody that's listening all over the planet, and everybody that's not listening all over the planet, to connect to this energy of light. So just feel light going everywhere in your body, 1,000,000,000 times 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 1,000,000,000. Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, all 9 shorts, boys and beyonds. And what is the light that you hold inside of yourself that's yours? The God within, the Goddess within. What is that special place inside of you that is just pure light? So would you be willing to activate that and just listen to your body? It might be in your heart. It might be someplace else. Where do you hold that affinity? Like, I love this power inside of me. I feel it very strongly. Where's that inside of you? And we ask, activate that energy 1,000,000,000 times 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 1,000,000,000 to the Godzillion. Right, wrong, good, bad, pot, all 9 shorts, boys and beyonds. So I'm hoping everybody all around the world is feeling a little bit lighter. I think it's a wonderful thing to have a tool that you get to be on the radio, talk to thousands of people, and activate consciousness. It's a lot of fun. And what's fun is a very important part of light embodiment. It's fun to have light embodiment. So keep in touch with your heart. Keep in touch with your body. Walk like a Magdalene. Walk like a cat. Whenever you have issues, deal with them and move on. This planet was meant to be a fun place, even though it's painful. So thank you, Alethiea, for being here today.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
And Alethiea has written 10 different books. She does workshops all over the world. And she's available through private sessions as well as workshops. You can rent a room at LeConte, and maybe she'll be here. So she travels a lot. But it's an amazing place to be. And of course, I'll be back here next week with another show. And I'll be leaving back in Austin in a couple of weeks after this and doing Austin stuff. But really glad everybody came to United Public Radio and UFO Paranormal Radio on YouTube, Facebook, and also Roku. We're on cable. So you can catch us in all of these places. And we really wish you the best, and hope you have more light in your life.